I'm William McKenna. I'm here at Greenfield-Central High School. I have the honor today of talking to Dave Hill from the Greenfield Daily Reporter. And I've learned some things about him today that I didn't know, that we both kind of got to Greenfield in the same year, in 2002, right?
2002, that's right.
You got here in June, and I got here in September, just 19 years ago. So it was very interesting. I didn't know that. I knew that I'd known you the entire time I've been here. I said, so I was very interested in hearing your story. But we're here today to talk about something a little special. We're going to talk about our experience on 9/11 20 years ago. We are here at the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and I was talking to Dave, and we started comparing our experiences on those days and what we were doing. For those of you who don't know, I used to work at WRTV6 before I was a teacher here at Greenfield-Central High School. So I was in the newsroom that morning because I worked the overnights at Channel 6, so I was right there when that happened. And Dave, you worked at the Indianapolis Star, right?
Yeah, I was an editor at the Indianapolis Star, and you know this was the biggest story of our generation until COVID came along. You know, very life-changing event. And you know, we were talking a few days ago about what our experiences were like in our newsrooms, and I was amazed that our experiences were very similar. So talk about what it was like when you first heard or first saw what was going on.
Well,
on
I would have got there in the morning. I think I got there at 3 o'clock in the morning for a 5 a.m. show. So I would have got there in the morning. I would have cut the show, whatever we would have had that day. I cannot remember any of the stories that we had in the regular morning news. And then about 5 o'clock, I would have left for the airport, or I would have went to the heliport downtown, and I would have went up in Skycam 6, and I would have went around on traffic and color shots for the news. That would have been my morning, and we would have finished that up. I don't know, sometime just after 7. We would have done a few cut-ins for Good Morning America. So I would have been back to the station. So I get back to the station. I know I cut a couple cut-ins for Good Morning America, where one of our weathermen or somebody would come up and do, like, 2 or 3 minutes, in that show about what's going on in Indiana and Good Morning America. So I was sitting there talking to another editor that was there, and we were in the editing bays that they used to have at Channel 6. They don't have them that way anymore. And we were talking, and then we didn't do our cutaway. Our local cutaway. They went to a special cutaway from network news, and they had this wide shot of New York City from a tower cam, which is a camera that's up on a big tower, like a radio tower in the city. And it was miles away from the Twin Towers. So you really couldn't sort it. You could see smoke, and you could tell there was a fire, but you really didn't have any concept of the scale of it, and the optics on cameras, back then weren't what they are now. Now you'd be amazed at the shot you could get, and you could control it remotely, and drones and all kinds of stuff. But at the time, we couldn't really do anything with it. But we just were watching it, and everybody started like, "What do you think this is?" We didn't really jump to any conclusions. We knew there was a fire. We had no concept how many floors that fire was on. As far as we knew, it was a floor. And then somebody said maybe a small plane had hit it, which seems very likely because it's such a big building. But we had still at that point, no one was really thinking any of it. So we're watching this for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then right while we're all watching it, that's when the second plane hit. And you could see that from the shot that was up. And then we knew something was on. Something was up. And I just remember somebody behind me in the newsroom said, "I don't know what's happening right now. What's going on?" And the editor I was with, he says, "Are we under attack?" And we're just, for a moment, everybody was frozen. We're just stunned. We've never seen anything like it. And as you know, in newsrooms, you have a plan for everything. Nothing's surprising because you've seen so many different things. We'd already seen, the federal building, it was bombed. We'd already seen Waco. We'd already seen, these are all big stories that I covered when I was at Channel 6. Columbine, huge stories.
Big storms.
Big storms, whatever was going on.
Yeah.
But at that moment, nobody knew what to do. And we just stood there, and we just looked at it. And in a television newsroom, we have monitors from all the competing networks, so we can see what they're doing. So everybody's got their version of what's going on, and they all got these different shots. So we're all looking at that. So I immediately go back to the editing bays, and one of the jobs I did was I downloaded network feeds. So we started, me and the other editor that was there, we started downloading all these network feeds and we're just watching all this raw footage. And very quickly, like every reporter, every live truck, a microwave truck was going there in New York City and setting up live shots. So they had all these constant live shots from what was going on. And they started recording everything, and we kept getting all these reports in from network. They didn't know what was going on. Nobody knew. And at that moment, no one knew what we were going to do. And then as things got worse all morning long, we had the next thing happened, the next thing happened, the next thing. We were like, what's going to happen next? But by 11:30, all the big players at Channel 6, I mean, everybody was in the news director's office. I mean, the best photographers, the best engineers, the best reporters, management upstairs, they were in there making a plan. By 11:30, they were loading up live trucks and microwave truck and satellite trucks to go east. They're like, we don't know what we're going to find when we get there. But WRTV6, we're going to load up and we're going to get there. And they drove there all night, and by the next morning they were there. I was amazed to be there at that time, to be a part of that. I don't think there was any good place to be when that happened, but I'm glad that I was in the profession that I was, so I could feel like I was doing something. I started cutting stories. They sent the word back, just start cutting B-roll, just start getting VOSOTs, whatever we can get. So we started cutting these little stories, and on an editing system called EditStar, which was one of the first digital editing systems that they ever used for television news. We were the first station in Indianapolis to use it. So we just started cutting these stories and put them in these files that they could use if they needed them. I don't think they ever used any of those stories. I don't think they broke away from network all day. I don't think there was anything locally cut in. I don't remember anything while I was there. It was all hands on deck. Everybody started coming into the station. Every reporter, every producer, every writer, everybody was coming in to see what they could do. Going out and getting local reactions, this, that, or the other. Like I said, I had a 6-year-old son at the time, and he was in school. I knew I had to leave at 1 o'clock no matter what to pick him up. There wasn't any option, but some people never left. They stayed all night. Mm-hmm. They stayed there all day and all night into the next day. I still can't remember if we did news the next day. I just know we cut stuff. I know that the helicopter was immediately grounded, and I didn't go up in the helicopter for, I think, a week or two. But when I left, I had to go pick my kid up, and I had a real bad tendency in those days, which I don't do now, was to drive my gas tank all the way down. And when I got back to where I lived in Lawrence, I was out of gas, and I had to get in line for gas. And that's when they had the big panic on the gas gas stations. Yeah,
because everybody thought we had no idea what might happen tomorrow. So yeah, I remember the lines of gas and the price gouging that took place in the days afterwards. My experience was very similar to that. I remember I was asleep because I'd worked the night before, and my wife, who's also an editor at the Star, came in and got me up and said, "There's planes at the World Trade Center or into the World Trade Center. You need to get up right now." And because we were both journalists, working at the same place, and we were like, what next? So we got dressed and went. She was beginning her shift, and I was kind of extending mine because I'd only been asleep for a few hours, and got up and we went in and we put out an extra edition that day. I think the headline said something like "Terror" and like 200-point type that we got out later that afternoon. And in those days, there was no internet, right? So the newspaper was still a fairly authoritative source for late-breaking news. And I remember driving to work that morning and being amazed that there were no planes in the sky. For some reason, that sticks with me more than the work that we did in the newsroom that day. I remember just everybody mobilizing and going crazy like what happened at Channel 6. But the thing I remember most is that drive and not seeing any aircraft anywhere. And wondering, there were still planes at that time that were still aloft that had not been accounted for, and nobody was quite sure where they were. To that day, that kind of gives me chills.
Yeah, I still remember when they grounded all the planes and everything that you're seeing, and immediately, on CNN, they were just throwing everything at the wall, but anything that would stick. What's going on? Who is it? Why is it? And stuff like that. And the live feeds I was watching, the thing that got me was I was watching exactly when the first tower fell and the second tower fell after that, and then of course what happened with the Pentagon. And by that time, so many live trucks were out. They had all these different angles on what was going on, and it was all just running live. I mean, they just weren't cutting them down. They said they were sending them up on the feeds, and every ABC affiliate could just grab them. And so, I mean, everybody was running them on time. I just remember when the first tower fell and that awful dust came out, there was a shot that was kind of up, and you just literally saw people running like something out of a horror movie. And it was like this dust was catching up with them as they were running, except for the police and the firefighters, and they were running in.
Yeah.
So when you got these people coming this way, they're running. So at the same time, you got a shot down below, and you have these firefighters and these police officers. They're pulling people out of the dust. They're telling them what to do this way, and they're getting bottles of water from wherever they can, and they're pouring this water in these people's faces, trying to get this dust out of their eyes, so that they could go. And a lot of the firemen had their masks on and stuff like that. So it was always amazing to me that the police and the firefighters, in the face of all this, they just kept running forward. I remember when Giuliani first got on the scene and what he was doing and how heroic he was that day. He was right out there with the people trying to see what was going on. He's literally screaming at people, get off the streets. I mean, he's really out there being a leader that day. Giuliani was really the man that day with the stuff that he was doing. It was incredible. It was one of the scariest and frightening things I ever went through. But the thing that really sticks with me isn't as much what happened the first day, because both the towers fell by the time I'd left work. And I watched CNN all that night as long as I could, and I went to bed and came back in at 3 o'clock in the morning. I asked the overnight producer and writer, I said, did they find anybody? And there had only been a couple of firefighters that they'd pulled out on the first day. So we did whatever we did the next day. So the next day I went through whatever I did, and I came back, and then on the next day I said, did they find anybody? And we never found anybody. So they never pulled anybody out that had been in the building. Yeah. And that just stuck with me, because I guess in my mind I don't know what I was thinking, and I didn't know what for some reason I thought somebody could have survived, and nobody did. Nobody that was in the building that was confirmed to have survived, and that just really stuck with me the most. And the most reason it sticks with me is because they were all just working people. They weren't anybody special. They were just some guy like me and you. They're just schlepping a job, and they just happened to be in the tallest building in New York, and they're just working people. They're not politicians. They're not special and not doing anything. Most of them are just probably wage earners trying to make a go of it, and janitors and maintenance people and security people that work in the building, restaurant workers or secretaries, or middle management people, stuff like that. And I was like, God, they didn't do anything to deserve that. They were trying to do what we're told to do as Americans, get a job, go to work, take care of your family, and that's what they were doing on that day. And then and then what happened? It was just heartbreaking that they never found. And then for the rest of the year, we had daily reports of how many bodies they would find, and it was really respectful how they did it and stuff. But as the days goes on, I just can't imagine those first responders what they had to deal with to be there every single day. So it was it was traumatic, and of course the ripple effects at the time, we had no idea what was going to be the ripple effects of all that, and it still affects things to this very day. That event.
It really changed society. I don't know. I've thought a lot about it over the years, especially as we're coming up on the 20th anniversary. And it was the first time America had been attacked
like that
since Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think it made us more mistrustful. We especially the last 5 or 6 years, we've experienced this fear of the other.
Yeah.
People who aren't like us, we tend to be mistrustful of. That to me was kind of where that sentiment got on steroids.
Yeah.
And it's kind of been ratcheted up there ever since. There's always been been that issue, but that seemed to be the period when it got really, when it really heightened. And I remember thinking, even before the day was out, somebody will pay. We're probably going to be at war by the end of the day, by the time the sun goes down. It obviously took a little longer, but here we are 20 years later. The war in Afghanistan, which sprung directly from those attacks, it is just now ending, and it's just the intervening years. When you try to build a timeline, it's just been astonishing what the country has been through and how the country changed. I'm just thinking about how travel changed.
Traveling, train. I mean, going to the airport is just a
you used to be able to you could have loved ones at the gate, and you'd have just all kinds of what today would be unthinkable security breaches. And I think, in a way, COVID is going to be the same way, in terms of changes in behavior and changes in institutions. The way travel was affected, the way medicine is being practiced now, I think is going to change from COVID. How we greet each other with handshakes. I shook hands the other day with a person, or with a couple people in a place where I was, and it felt strange. I felt like it was a violation to be shaking hands. And the sensation, I mean, they're not really related, but the sensation is kind of the same as I felt in the months after 9/11, with all the changes that were coming down. And suddenly, oh my gosh, because of Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, we had to take off our shoes when we went to the airport and went through security. We had to submit to pat downs, some of which were not very comfortable. So it's just been amazing that throughout the intervening years how things have evolved.
I really think, as far as stories goes, I think 9/11 is drastically bigger than COVID. I think in the long term, sooner or later, we're going to get over this virus, and I just still think I think 9/11 is still going. I understand that we recently left Afghanistan, but I don't think that's the end of it. And it's, we lost so many people here, but the ripple effect was a lot of people overseas lost their jobs, lost their lives as well, from the various, attacks and stuff like that, fighting terrorists and stuff like that. There's a lot of people that got caught in that crossfire, and it's just so sad on so many fronts. And I guess I'll never understand it. I don't understand the goal of why that had to happen, or what the ultimate outcome was. Maybe what has happened is what someone wanted. I don't know. It's just a tragic loss of life, because all of us, all we know that we have is this one life. We don't, you get philosophical about what's next or not, but we only know really what's right now, for sure. And there's just a lot of people's lives were snuffed out that day. And I'm like, gosh, what a waste. And not only that, I think about the terror the people on the planes must have felt. We talk a lot about the people in the building, but there was people on those planes, and what they went through, and then their families, and that ripple effect, and how long that is going to be. It's going to affect all the individual lives, not necessarily on a national scale. How many people's lives are destroyed today because of? How many parents lost children? How many children lost their parents? It's just overwhelming. So I think it's the number one worst thing that's ever happened to America. I think it's worse than Pearl Harbor. We kind of understood that, war. This thing is still baffling. The overall goal, what was the purpose? And it was the way that it was planned. It was just like it's almost if I said, Dave, why don't you read my screenplay? Got to read this awesome screenplay. And I went to you and said, Bill, ain't no one ever going to believe that. But it happened. But it absolutely happened. So it's just so many ways. And it's of course 20 years. I look at my own life. I was 37 at the time. Had 2 small children. I was at Channel 6. I've been there 5 years. And it was just so different. Now I'm 57, and I'm like, if you told me 20 years ago we'd be talking about it like this today, I was like, we're not gonna this. That the ripple effect would be felt so far down the road, and how it shaped my youngest son's life. He was only 11 months old. Things he's never known a life without it. okay? And my other son was only 6. And then remember that we had all the anthrax scares after? Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
They had an anthrax scare at my kid's school. Oh my gosh, it was just
And every student at Greenfield-Central today, it is history from before they were born.
Yeah, that's right. All my students had not experienced it. They weren't alive when it happened. Their parents were. And God, remember we were just glued to CNN 24/7 for weeks.
How do you think the reporting would be different? Now, today when you watch video, it's still basically all static camera positions from various vantage points looking up.
Yeah. Well, if they were doing it now, it would all be shot for TikTok or for Instagram, and it would been shot in the wrong aspect ratio. It would have been a lot of.
It probably would be more horrifying.
It would be
as
more
horrifying as that was, because
it would be right there, and it would all be personal. It would be person to person what they were reporting. There would be unbelievable amount of footage. There's a great deal of footage now. There is incredible footage now. When you really look on, if you go look online, you will find unbelievable footage. And here's the thing: there were a lot of footage that I saw. The one thing that people didn't know at the time, which I knew, was because I was watching it live, was that people were jumping out of the buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in the newsroom, and they're like, "Is that debris?" And I was like, "Oh my God, that's a person!" And you just saw these people just jumping out, and people that you couldn't really tell that. But on the ground, there is some footage. I remember this startling footage. It was just a woman looking, and she just went like this because she'd seen somebody. She was close enough to see what was happening. But it would be so personal, the way that it would be covered now. It would be immediately on Instagram or Facebook pages or all those different. You can stream live anywhere now. Something that was unheard of when I was.
And news organizations. You talked about having the live feeds from all the networks. News organizations like the ones you and I work for. Like I said earlier, we're still authoritative sources for that kind of news. And I think if that, God forbid, whenever something really horrible like that happens, traditional news organizations almost take a back seat to what is being shared by people who are on the scene. Maybe it lacks context that traditional news organizations can provide, but it's still out there being shared, and organizations like ours, on events like that today, just kind of are chasing it.
Yeah.
In a way that would be much different from the way it was reported back then.
Yeah. Now it would just be instantaneous. Whoever was there, who was ever close. There's positives to it and negatives. The positive is it's fresh, it's raw, and it's coming from where they're at. But the other thing is sometimes you're right. You need the context. You need to know what's going on, and sometimes you don't know that in the moment. So it's just so hard in the long run to say. Don't forget, during Katrina, I went down. My dad lived in Louisiana. I went down during Katrina during that, and it helped him. That was also before a lot of the social media and stuff like that. So that was another big tragedy. So. Social media and things like that are here to stay. But I still think you have to go. If something like that was happening, I would be tuned into Channel 6 immediately. Mm-hmm. I would be seeing people. I would be seeing Rafael Sanchez and the people that are over there, and Terry is the news director. I would know, and I would probably be emailing her, saying, "What do you know about this and that and the other?" Because I know what they're going to be presenting is going to give me some context to deal with, not just raw footage. Of course, I'm a professional. I know how to discern what's real and not real when I look at things. I always tell the students that, that's not real. That's not what's happening there, and this, that, and the other. So it would be different. For me, when you're talking about print, print is, for me, it's like if it's important and it's in print, it's more important because someone took time to write it and put it down. And of course, the newspaper is a chronicle of every day. I don't know how many thousands of Greenfield daily reporters are out there, but it's a chronicle for every day that happened in this county. And those are important things. And I'm not sure that the social media is going to capture that correctly. I'm not sure that people are going to be looking back on old Instagram accounts for what actually happened in Greenfield on this day. So I looked at the paper this morning. I saw what you put out on the headlines this morning. Some guys won some medals and this, that, and the other. I looked at the obituaries. I looked at the police report. You had something on there about food safety and stuff like that. That's a chronicle for that day. I'm not sure that the social media is going to do that. Okay, that's forever. If I've even emailed you before. Hey, Dave, I'm like trying to look remember the story from whatever day.
Yeah.
What and he said, oh yeah, it's right here, and you can, and there's a way that you can look that up. So I'm not sure. I know Channel 6, their archive is unbelievable. I used to do their archive tapes and what they have. So you still need the media that I teach and that you do to have the real chronicle. And I was talking to your photographer, Tom Russo, who is everywhere. Tom Russo, right?
Tom, yes.
Oh, yeah, he's everywhere. We
Yes.
see him, in fact, when we do football games, they say we need a graphic. Say, Tom's here. Put Tom Russo, photographer, Greenfield Daily Reporter, because he's always there. So I'm not sure it's a game if he's not there. And I was talking to him. I said, man, look how much of this county you've chronicled, because he's only been here just roughly about the same time I have. And he said, yeah, I think about it, all this time I've been there, and I have all these pictures that I've taken that have happened in this county. And now, like you said, they have the context of where he was at on those days, and they're all logged and they're all filed. Mm-hmm. And someday people are going to be wanting that stuff. Everything's short-sighted. In 50 years, those old Greenfield Daily Reporters are going to be important. I have every VHS tape I ever recorded with kids in this building, and they're all up in a loft someplace, and people are like, don't you think we ought to get rid of them? It's like, oh no. I said, someday those kids are going to want that. They're going to want it. They're going to want to see what that was. They don't think of it now.
Yeah.
I've had kids come back to me just 2 years later. Do you still have this project I did? And I'm like, I probably don't. That's why I told you to keep it, because I said I can't keep everything forever here. I don't have the capability. So, I think what we provide is more important than social media. Look, if I see it in a reporter, I know you. I know it's not going to be in a reporter, because if it's not important, because Dave Hill's the editor. He's in charge of it. I know who you are. I know what's going to happen. When I watch something on Channel 6, I know Terry. I know what she's going to put on there. If I see Rafael Sanchez doing a story, I know Rafael. I know what he's doing. I trust that. I don't trust anything on social media. Definitely Facebook or some guy. I always get that one in front of me. Some guy said. Well, who's some guy? I'm some guy. What's that mean? Some guy said. So I think what we provided on 9/11 was way more important than something that might have been provided today. But we still do it. That's what people forget. We're still doing it. CBS and ABC and NBC, they still send out people. They still have bureaus all over the world. Their coverage of the Afghanistan situation is exceptional. CNN's doing a great job. I haven't watched anything on Fox. As far as the actual covering of the events before it becomes opinion, you can't beat it. And local news is just news. It's not opinion. And the reporter's not opinion. When I read a story in the reporter, I don't read, this is my opinion on something that just happened, unless it's an opinion piece. He says, this thing happened in Greenfield on this day, this is what we saw, this is who we talked to, and this is what they had to say. It doesn't take in, it's not the reporter going, hey, I'm the reporter on the scene, this is what I think. Okay, and that's a big difference. That's a big difference between reporting and giving an opinion. Reporting is the facts as we have them, and opinion is what you think about it. And that's just different. So I think what we do is still important. I tell the students every day, I think what you're doing is important. I think newspapers are important. I used to deliver the Indianapolis Star and the Indianapolis News. That's how old I am. I have delivered the Star in the morning and the News in the afternoon. It's interesting to see what's happening with all that. So we'll see what happens in the next 20 years with our business and what we do and how we provide things. So, it's strange. 20 years.
20 years.
How old were you 20 years ago?
I was 43.
43. Just slightly older than me.
So I was a little more into my career, and like I said before, it was just you came out of that with the feeling that things were never going to be the same.
Oh, they haven't been the same.
Yeah, and there are so few events like that in a lifetime. When you make a timeline of the things that have happened in your life, there are very few events like that are going to get a dot on your timeline as big as that one was. I mean, that just changed. That changed everything. It changed our politics. You know, it changed our military. It changed the way we waged war. It changed how we at home felt about our role in the world. I remember thinking at the time, why would somebody do this to us?
Yeah.
And I remember trying to find answers to that question and reading books. You know, why do people hate America so much? And to this day, I still don't think I have a satisfactory answer for that. But it's been an interesting journey exploring that question, and you know, comparing that to the ideas of American exceptionalism, and the fact that America should have primacy over everybody else in the world. And you know, it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think 9/11 kind of underscored that somewhat. You know, not to give credence to any motive, because it was terrorism, but it really has caused me over the years to just kind of reflect about our role in the world. And there have been terror attacks everywhere else since then, and in that regard, we're not exceptional, other than the
scope. The scope was so big.
Yeah, other than the symbolism of attacking the biggest buildings in the country and the catastrophic loss of life, which I think exceeds what has happened in any other attack, you know, from Kenya and Tanzania to the London bus bombings and airport bombings elsewhere.
I don't think that we'll ever know. We'll never have the reason or how come. We're probably one of the few countries in the world where it could have happened. I don't think they didn't seem to be interested in any place else in the world except for us, for whatever reason. I don't think we're ever going to know. I think you would get a lot of opinions on that. I can honestly say I've never understood it. I've never understood what's the point of that. You know, I just think of all the people that were lost, not just here, and all the people that were lost as a direct result of it. So it's a head shaker, and I guess we'll never know. And I don't know that we'll ever be over it. I think we'll be over COVID long before we'll be over 9/11. It's going to be a long time before that's not fresh in our minds. For anybody who was of age to remember something, my young son, who could remember, he'll probably be like the Kennedy assassination. Where were you that day when it happened? I feel eternally linked to my friends and people I worked with at WRTV6. I'm grateful for them and their professionalism on that day, because when we were really facing something, we all did our jobs. We went right back to the job. We were all news people. We went back to whatever our function in the newsroom and providing the news was, and we did it to the best of our abilities. And WRTV6 for sure, and I'm sure all the other locals did the same. We were at our best when everything was at its worst. So, and I bet the Star was as well.
Agreed.
So that's it. I think that's a good place to kind of wrap up our thoughts on what the 20th anniversary of 9/11 means to us, or what do we remember about it. I do know that for a while it brought us together as a country. There wasn't a red state or blue state. We were just America, and of course it wasn't too long before we kind of spread back out again. But we all wanted answers. We all wanted to be together, and when people needed each other, nobody asked when they were pulling people off the street what their political worldview was, and Americans always do that. So you'll hear one day where everybody's mad at this group and that group, but again, when our back's against the wall, we'll help each other. I think 9/11 showed that, and I think the world saw that too. He said, well, you know, they took a pretty big punch, but the old dog got back up pretty good. So I guess that's my takeaway from 20 years.
Optimism. We need to be optimistic.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, I'm going to shake your hand anyways. I got hand sanitizer right over there. I know it feels great to see you. You've been a good friend of my program here, the Greenfield Daily Reporter, and you do great work. And
thanks for having me on.
I hope this
Enjoyed it.
I hope this has been informative from two old dudes.